folks. Why Would You Ask That is a podcast that answers some of the weirdest questions. A lot of those are inappropriate for some listeners. If you're squeamish, easily disturbed, or just having a bad day, this may not be for you. But if you've got to know the answers like we do, stay tuned.
Why Would You Ask That? Presented by me, M, they, them, and
Karen, she, her, and
Remy, he, they.
And today we are talking about Juneteenth!
Woo!
Which is a holiday that slowly is becoming a thing celebrated by companies and the government.
It is a federally recognized holiday.
Yes. So, what is Juneteenth?
Juneteenth is a combination of June and 19th, and it celebrates like the day that finally the last group of African American enslaved people learned of their freedom and could finally just leave the plantation. Basically, watered down version.
Simplified to its bare bones.
Yeah, I have a lot more to say about it, but that is the basic definition.
Has it been celebrated all this time since that day?
Not as a country, and not as a recognized holiday, but it's been celebrated in ways, off and on.
Okay. When did it become a federally recognized holiday? I feel like that was really recent.
Yeah, it was like 2 years ago.
Oh.
Kind of a show of support after the Black Lives Matter stuff started getting bigger, I guess.
Yeah, Joe Biden made it a federal holiday in 2021.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Listen, don't thank Joe Biden for it.
I won't.
I want you to thank 94-year-old Miss Opal Lee, who has been fighting for her entire life for it to become a federally recognized holiday.
Oh, hell yeah. Thank you, Mrs. Lee.
Gracias, Mrs. Lee. I don't know why I said it like that.
That's okay.
I don't know. As a matter of fact, a lot of the links that I was reading, when it even referenced the fact that Biden signed this into law at all, usually referenced it in the fact that whenever the black community gets something of theirs federally recognized, it's because they've made it be so, and the government has had no choice in the matter. That they have had to placate in some way because of something else.
Oh, well, alright.
That sounds about right.
Yeah. So, that happened in like a bunch of different articles. All the articles that I was reading were coming from Black Voices, so there was like a list. I've read so many articles over the last 2 weeks, but that was even in a blog post from the Library of Congress on the subject.
Oh, yeah?
This feeling that the only reason that it's become a national holiday, a federally recognized holiday, is this feeling of needing to placate the black community into feeling like better about their current situation in this country.
Okay.
Which, when it's coming from your own Library of Congress, that's sad.
It is.
Yeah. Yeah. And is it, like, even sufficient to
Fuck no.
make... I'm like, I feel like that's kind of like the very, very least they could do with everything that, you know, Black Lives Matter and the black community of America has asked for. But, I mean, I don't want to diminish the work that everyone's been putting into it to actually get it recognized. So,
yeah,
you know.
It is the first, what did I read? It is the first new federal holiday since, Martin Luther King Day, I think it said? Yeah. The first new the first new federal holiday since 1983, when Martin Luther King Jr. Day was created.
Okay.
Do you think it's kind of performative, just doing this?
Probably.
Like, a lot of stuff has become, air quotes, aware, and air quotes, woke. But I wonder how much of it is, like, performative? Like, is what we're doing now in acknowledging and looking at the holidays, especially paying attention to, like, people of color and such, is that performative? Is it virtue points? Is it, like, legitimate interest? I know I'm interested. I don't know much about anything, but I always just wonder, like, is it just, like, putting up a billboard and calling it a day? Like,
well, from my perspective, I never try to think of it as, like, I'm trying to get points or be a pick-me or anything like that. I'm just trying to listen, gather information, and inform myself, not for the sake of, appearing to everyone else as a woke individual, but in order to genuinely provide a place where people can feel safe and comfortable to be themselves. If that makes sense. Like, I'm not trying to appear to anyone as a good person. It's just, I like to have this information so that I can, understand what people are going through and, I don't know, feel like a part of the community. I don't know. Maybe that's weird. I just like to hear about it and learn about it.
I mean, we are an education-focused podcast.
Yeah.
Focused on what people want to learn about. And I assume that, especially with growing cultural awareness toward, the Black community especially, there's a need for people to be able to know and learn. I just, worry about stuff like that all the time. Like, is this a show that we're putting on? Is it just surface level, skin deep? Like,
I get it.
I think about this for a lot of things. It's like when fucking Amazon is like, it's Workers' Rights Day, and you're like...
and you're like, what?
You don't give a shit. Or, like, when people are suddenly like, listen to marginalized community voices, or... and, like, they do what they do and have their little banners for the points that it gives them because they're being aware, but, like, at the same time, like, a lot of shit.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I looked up some of the quoting that I had been reading about this exact topic, and so I wanted to pull this out specifically in reference to this. In the wake of the nationwide protests against police brutality in 2020, the push for federal recognition of Juneteenth gained momentum, and Congress quickly pushed through legislation in the summer of 2021 to make it a federal holiday.
Quickly.
Yeah. Because as I mentioned Miss Opal Lee, and she's literally 94, and she's been fighting for, like, all of her adult life to try to make this thing a federal holiday, or at least to be recognized and to be allowed to celebrate it at all openly. And it's just now after George Floyd happened and protests happened and people are having their defund the police protests, and the government is like, we gotta give people something. Let's give them a holiday. Like,
it's like, okay, it doesn't really solve the issue, but okay.
That seemed like it was a sentiment in, like, just so many articles that I was reading, that him signing it into a federal law is, like, it's nice. It's a recognition, but it doesn't mean anything in particular. Just that they always do something like this to try to, like, placate the community instead of actually doing anything for the civil rights of the community. And I was like, yeah, I can see where this attitude is coming from, like, where that feeling is at. And I can get behind that as a queer person, also.
Mm-hmm. With all the Target pride.
Oh, God.
with all of us on the podcast being a queer person of some variety. we also have like a long history of trying to get our right to exist in this country noticed and recognized, but also to just in fact have any rights whatsoever, and not just have rainbow flags painted on everything, or like have a holiday, or have people be like, you can totally have a parade, that's fine, but also we definitely don't want you to be allowed to have children
Yeah.
or live here or whatever. Like, telling us that we're allowed to have a parade doesn't equal telling us that we're allowed to get married. Like,
Right. Or that you have the right to go to the bathroom here.
or yeah, very, very prevalent to me right now. I cannot go to the bathroom in the bathroom that matches my gender right now.
Yeah.
in my state that I live in.
Yeah.
So, but like, I could go to Pride right now and like have a great Pride celebration if I wanted to, I guess. But like, if I went into a local business to pee while I was doing it, I could get arrested.
That's so fucked.
Yeah, it is. And like, it's great that on June 19th, my daughters can wish. Literally, I had my daughter show me all of her friends, my oldest one, in the yearbook, and not a one. Like I have said before, not a one of them is white because they go to a primarily black school. That's where we live in the city, and that's where they go. And so they can go and tell all of their friends, like, Happy Juneteenth, or I would have to look up how to approach that. I don't know how to approach that. But, or whatever, if their school did something, if they were still in school or whatever, and that's fine, but also in this state, they're not allowed to learn about critical race theory.
I mean, yeah.
Like, they don't get to learn about Juneteenth in school.
No.
They didn't. They didn't learn about it before school ended.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it is a holiday.
Yes.
So from us here on this podcast, none of us are black. But I don't think it's performative for us to educate. Because, man, I'm doing my best to educate my kids in a non-performative way so that they can non-performatively support their black friends. And you two, neither one of you are performative because you honestly want to be, like, the best allies. And so we want to do our best to educate the people in our audience who don't know. Who don't know anything.
Yeah.
Or very little. Because nobody, like, it's not like our education system is going to teach us.
Yeah, they definitely won't. And it's right now it's the job of people telling other people.
And I listened to a bunch of podcasts by black creators, and those were good. I got the story from them, and it's not like I can't go sit down with with any of my kids' friends' moms or whatever, and ask them to, like, talk to me about the injustices of the initial Juneteenth stuff, because it's not her job to educate me.
Right.
So I've just been furiously educating myself for a while, but for the last 2 weeks in preparation for this episode, so I could tell all of the listeners a story that they're not going to just, like, learn from the government who signed it into holiday, but don't particularly care if you know anything about it.
Right. Because it's not like you can take the day off. It's not like
Yes.
you don't get holiday pay, which is
It's not that kind of federally recognized holiday.
Right. It's a holiday that a lot of people, from my experience and from what I've heard in our workplaces, is that people can take the day off. Like, a lot of people do take that day off in protest of having to work that day. So they'll use their regular PTO to take off that day. And I'm like, they should just get the day off. Like, give them the day off. I feel, how do I explain that it's kind of like a religious holiday in that I don't observe the religion because obvious, but
It's not something that's meant for you,
yeah,
but it's still something that should be very much acknowledged.
yeah, it's not a holiday that I would ever take off. However, it I think that people should be given the opportunity to receive pay, even though they aren't working that day, because, history. I feel like it's the least we could do. The least corporations could do, the least that companies could do, the least that institutions could do. I don't know. Maybe that's performative, though. I don't know. This is why I'm not qualified to talk about this. Okay, so Remy, lead us.
Well, how much did the two of you know about Juneteenth?
I didn't know anything at all until people started talking about it during the pandemic.
Yeah.
And then my dad would say things like, "Hey, I have Juneteenth off. Do you have it off?" And I go, "What?
What's Juneteenth?" Yeah. That's about my knowledge.
Okay. Really?
Yeah. I wish I... Yeah, no, I don't know really. I didn't know a whole lot about it. I knew that it was vaguely to do with slavery and the freedom of slaves, but I also thought it had something to do with the civil rights movement and maybe also a little bit of Stonewall, but that was all I knew.
Yeah, if I had stayed in the United States, maybe I would have learned more.
You would not have. I mean, no, being honest, you wouldn't have.
Yeah, that's fair. Like, when I was living in Canada, I focused more on other things, so, like, indigenous stuff.
But even if you'd been here.
No, because I didn't know anything about Juneteenth until, like, several years back when, I don't know, I think maybe a podcast I was listening to said something about it, or I don't even remember how I heard about it, but I heard about it, and then I looked into it. Okay. And this is, like, the common story that I've heard or read, and this is even from, like, over the last week, I started listening to podcast episodes that were about Juneteenth, and not just from this year's Juneteenth, like, revving up to this year's Juneteenth, but, like, from last year, too. And, podcasts that I, like, really like, where I get a lot of, like, my information about Black history, the common thread is even amongst them is, like, I didn't even know a lot about this, and it's my history.
Wow. Okay. That makes me feel like 2% better. Okay, 10. Makes me feel 10% better.
Yeah, it's not a you problem. Not knowing a lot about Juneteenth isn't even necessarily a white problem. It's an education system problem. Because, like with so much of Black history, you just don't get taught it in school. Mm-hmm. So, if you aren't living somewhere that has, like, a really strong, like, oral history community, then even if you are part of a Black community, then maybe you just didn't hear a lot about it growing up, is what I'm taking from all of the research that I've been doing.
Okay.
Valid.
One of my podcasts that I've mentioned on here before is a Redacted History podcast. Mm. And he has a TikTok too. I'll post it somewhere on the resource page. And his podcast episodes are like 30 minutes long. He talks about Black history solely, and he talks about the stuff that almost entirely about stuff that even if you went to, like, a really good school in, like, a really good area or, like, a private school, you maybe still didn't hear about. And so he said, when talking about this, he said, I didn't learn anything about Juneteenth until a few years back.
Wow.
Oh, wow. That's pretty serious.
He said that he had a public school education in South Carolina. And he said that he couldn't understand that even with that, why he didn't really know much about it. Like, that why he didn't know more of the story, even with living where he lived and having the education he had. And it's just because, frankly, like, there's not a lot of clarity for large chunks of the story.
Okay.
Oh?
Yes.
It's just kind of...
What is meant by clarity?
The way I would interpret it is that there's conflicting things, or like it's just kind of been lost to history.
Yeah, what has happened is that like nobody really knows exactly why events happened the way that they happened, leading up to like the final group of enslaved people finally hearing about everything happening. Nobody really knows how that happened exactly. Nobody knows why it took so long exactly. Nobody knows the exacts in the story of Juneteenth, because I mean it happened in 1865 and it's hard to know exacts anyway, no matter what skin tone that you have, no matter what history you're hearing about. Exacts are difficult to pin down anyway.
Yeah.
And no matter how much you read about white history and they want you to read in the history book how exact they think everything is, even in there, that's not exact. We don't know exactly any of that stuff. Anytime that we have exacts, it's because we have first-hand knowledge. Now, we do have plenty of exacts about what happened after people heard the news and after it was official that everybody was free and that everybody knew about it. Because if you go to the Library of Congress, there is an enormous wealth of first-hand information from black people who were there and who heard about it and was living on plantations and left plantations.
Oh, that's cool.
It was, let me see. Let me get the actual number. That way I don't lie. And because also it's a really big number. It is... Nope, passed it. So, the most extensive from the Library of Congress Timeless website, which is where all their blog posts and stuff are, the most extensive collection of stories is in, quote, Born in Slavery, Slave Narratives from the Federal Writers Projects, 1936 to 1938. So, that is a project that was undertaken during that 2-year period to collect, like, the narrative of people who were born in slavery. So that particular 2-year chunk of information, 2-year narrative research, it contains more than 2,300 first-person accounts and more than 500 black and white portraits of formerly enslaved people.
Whoa. That's a lot.
And so, for example, just because I really want to encourage people to go over there, because I didn't really know that this archive existed in the way that it does exist. So here's a picture for the two of you. Look at this man. This guy's name is Billy McCree or McRae. He was born into slavery, and you can hear him talk about listening to the proclamation be read on Juneteenth.
Whoa.
In an interview.
That's rad.
Yeah. I listened to it. It's two parts. I listened to part 2 is where he really talks about it. The rest of it, he's kind of just talking about how life was like, and he was talking about, like, the sheriff, and how people didn't like the sheriff, and he was, sorry, it just made me, same, Billy.
Yeah.
And, he talked a lot about the horses on the plantation where he lived, and what color they were, and the mules, like a lot about the horses and the mules. Like 3 minutes of the 7 minutes of part 2 is him mostly talking about the animals on the plantation.
Aw, he's an animal lover.
Yeah, and then somewhere around like the 3-minute mark, he talks about how the Union soldiers leave the plantation, and that he is standing there with his mom when he asks his mom, where are they going? And the Union soldier says, all of you slur are free now.
Oh.
Yeah.
Love the slur, like, slapdash in the middle.
Yeah, like, what the fuck? Okay.
I mean, it's 1865, so...
I don't have high expectations for that, to be honest.
Yeah, no high expectations for it.
Yeah.
Just because they're
Oof.
from the Union didn't mean that they were good.
Yeah.
And it didn't always mean that they weren't okay with slavery. New York had slavery in it. And even the Library of Congress warns you on their website that listening to any of the recorded interviews, of which there are so many recorded interviews, that listening to those recordings, you're going to hear lots of slurs.
Wow.
Because listening to these formerly enslaved people talk about their life, or what people said to them, or even how the Union soldiers talk to them, they're going to talk about it. And one of the most unnerving ways to process information about Juneteenth and the origins of Juneteenth, if you're choosing to go back to original first-hand accounts, is that you're going to get such a flat way of hearing about it. One of the articles I read said, the things you learned about Juneteenth are wrong, and one of the bullet points was that they took the news with suspicion and didn't trust it.
Considering everything that's going on around them, no, I wouldn't trust it either.
Yeah. I mean, you're getting the news from cops in different colored coats.
Exactly. That's such a good way of putting it.
Wow. I mean, yeah, I could understand that. I mean, I could understand being afraid to leave, cause, the being hunted down is that. Oh, God. And even if someone did tell you, yeah, you're free, it's law now, it's okay, but who's gonna stop these people from coming after me anyway? Who's going to make them just let me leave? How are you going to do that? I would be scared too. Yeah. Oh, that sucks.
Yeah, and man, I have points to make about some stuff that you just said, but it's in the story, actually, so I'm just gonna get there. There's a picture of Opal Lee, by the way.
Oh, I love her shirt.
I just wanted to show her to you.
Opal's walk to DC.
Yeah, she was 89 in this picture.
Oh, that's awesome.
And she was walking from Fort Worth to Washington, D.C.
Wait, what?
Yeah.
Texas?
Yeah.
Wait, what?
Yeah.
She was, what? Sorry. It's a lot to get me to go up the stairs. So she walked from Fort Worth, Texas to Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
That's how bad she wants it.
It's true, that's why she did it. She was 89, decided to walk from her home in Fort Worth to Washington, D.C. in an effort to get Juneteenth named a national holiday. She traveled 2.5 miles each day to symbolize the 2.5 years that black Texans waited between when Abraham Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation, abolishing slavery, and the day that message arrived in Galveston.
Whoa. How long did this take her?
I mean, a long time, I assume.
Yeah. Man.
Why would you assume when you have the internet?
That's a good point.
Yeah, look it
You
up.
want me to look? Okay, I'm gonna go look.
I'm already doing it.
Oh, okay. Your keyboard does not so I don't know if it's doing any. I don't know if you're doing anything.
1,400 miles is how long she walked. That's how far it was.
1,400 miles. Okay, 1,400 miles, and she did 2.5 miles every day, divided by 2.5. It's about 560 days. Yeah. So a year and 195 days.
No, I just can't.
I mean, but she did, and that's badass.
It's very impressive.
Yeah. All right. So, tell us more about Juneteenth. Where do we stop off? At this gentleman and the Library of Congress. Go check it out, folks.
Yeah, it's fascinating, and I spent quite a bit today not putting together my notes because I got sucked into the rabbit hole of just spending so much time clicking on things, because it's got a little drop-down menu where you can search by subject, and then it'll just bring up every article that they've ever written on the Library of Congress about that subject, because this is their blog, remember, where they just want to lead you to their actual archives.
Mm-hmm.
And there's like, I looked at the American Folk Museum page because I have, if you listen to our Jack episode, I have my ancestor who like helped preserve those and invented new ones who came over here. So I looked over there, and there's like 100 things in there, blog posts.
Awesome.
So I was like, I can't do this. And then I clicked on a lot more things after I said I can't do this. Okay. Now that Karen, you said what you said, that they treated news of their freedom with suspicion or fear, or like probably it wasn't true or whatever, because a really nice phrase is that it's just cops in different coats. And yeah, what's to stop them from just deciding that that's not what they're going to do, and let's just enslave people again? Just any number of things. What's to stop them from telling me that I can't leave and not letting me walk off the plantation? So I'm gonna actually start my notes now, because I at this point have not actually looked at my notes at all.
Boy.
Oh, okay.
And let me actually start the story that I had written down.
Yeah, let's get into it.
And then just reiterating that the three of us aren't black.
I think you can listen to me and know that.
The three of us connect with this in various ways. All three of us are in the LGBTQ community, and so we have a shared history of, like, marginalization and such, you know, and I've got, like, a good chunk of Native American ancestry. I literally just mentioned my relative that did the Jack stories, that comes from Cherokee ancestry, so, you know, we had the whole trail of tears, so, which is rough, and then
I'm diaspora. I feel like I don't have history, so
I've done a lot of research so that I can present something about this topic in a way that is sensitive to the fact that none of us are black. But I wanted to also educate people who, like the three of us, grew up in the American educational system and literally didn't know Juneteenth was a word that existed until long past when we should have learned about it, and then didn't know what it was. So that's where I'm starting. So if I get things wrong, which I might, please email and tell me I did it.
Yes.
Yeah, I can't issue the corrections if you don't tell me I need to correct.
We are happy to take constructive criticism on some of this.
education comes first, dignity second.
There you go. I like that.
Yeah, I'm pretty happy to learn when I get things wrong, because that means that I get to learn the right things. And learning is my favorite thing, which sounds like I'm lying, but I'm not lying. That's
Sound like a teacher's pet. Out here brown nosing for your fucking A. Alright, Remy. Take it away.
okay. So, we're gonna go to June 19th, 1865. Logan Stroud, he's one of the largest slave owners in East Texas.
Okay.
He walks out onto his front porch at his plantation home, and 150 of his enslaved workers gathered around to listen to what he had to say.
Oh, okay.
That's where we're starting.
Okay.
So he pulls out a dispatch from U.S. Major General Gordon Granger. The Confederacy had officially surrendered in April, but the last holdouts in Texas had fought on past that, but were officially defeated now. And so finally, Lincoln's 1863 Emancipation Proclamation was going to be put into effect.
Oh.
So here's what those enslaved people would have heard. Quote, "The people of Texas are informed that in accordance with a proclamation from the Executive of the United States, all slaves are free. This involves an absolute equality of personal rights and rights of property between former masters and slaves." Quote.
Involves what?
So, once again, this involves an absolute equality of personal rights and rights of property between former masters and slaves. Quote,
Rights of property.
Mm-hmm. Because people were property, but now they're not.
yeah. And it followed up with a line about now the relationship between the two of those things were going to be that of an employer and an employee.
Oh.
So basically, immediately after, they're like, okay, now get back to work.
Well, so we know that at this point in his reading, at that line in particular, former masters and slaves. So we know at this point in his reading, Logan Stroud started crying.
Why?
What?
Why did he start crying?
Well, he had 11,000 acres of farm and animals and all of this. He had been working on this farm his whole life. He's 51 years old and he's obscenely wealthy, and he had done it all with slave labor.
Mm-hmm.
And so now he's being told that he has to give up all of his enslaved population, which is a significant amount of people. So who's going to deal with 11,000 acres and all of his crops and all of his animals? Not him and his, like, couple of daughters and stuff. Sure, for sure. Like, that's what he's thinking. So he starts crying. We know he started crying because that detail was written down. The details were recorded by the Limestone County Historical Commission.
Oh, they were just like, oh, we gotta get this on tape.
Roll it. Roll it.
My assumption is that he was just a big asshole. And so whoever was recording the events needed to write down that he started crying.
Wow.
Oh, it's like that Chinese emperor who said, like, make sure the historian doesn't record this when he fell off his fucking horse.
Yeah.
Sorry, I love that.
It's one of my favorite, like, random things to know.
And so that front porch, the Stroud front porch, that became one of the birthplaces of Juneteenth, when the final group of enslaved people in the United States were informed of the end of the Civil War and of slavery. So,
Wow.
like I said, there's lots of thoughts as to why it took so long for the enslaved people of Texas to get the news. There's one of the theories that comes up over and over is that the messenger who was on his way to Texas got killed on the road.
Oh.
That came up a bunch.
Probably.
I don't like that. It takes all the agency out of the people who were in charge of the situation.
No, I feel like he was assassinated.
Oh, that's where you're at.
Yeah, like, they were like, he's got the message, kill him. So that, shoot the messenger. So that he can't deliver the news. And I'm not thinking like it was just some random robber. I'm thinking like
a purposeful, coordinated attack in order to delay the inevitable.
Yeah, like, he went to somebody and was like, okay, here's the news. Now I have to go tell another plantation. And he turned around and they shot him. That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, I see that.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm picturing the plantation owners are all Tim Stark from the Tiger King documentary.
Wonderful choice.
And so, thank you. I mean, he is definitely that kind of guy. So,
Okay. So, some people just like very meh. Like, the very meh theory is just like, yeah, and then the government just delayed it.
I mean, I could see that
Also
too.
a possibility, yeah.
I mean, yeah, sure.
That one it would not surprise me. Also, just because bureaucracy is a thing.
Yeah, fair.
Speaking as a bureaucrat.
Same here, working with the DMVs, man.
So, the one theory that I like the most doesn't involve the messenger being killed or anything. So there's none of the drama, really. It's just that the theory is just that the local government, like the government of Texas or whatever, decided that they were just going to not tell people, and that way they could get one more harvest out of people before they decided to free everybody. That's the other theory that floats around.
Oh,
That is the one that feels the most likely, huh?
that is despicable and highly likely.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So there's official reasons why it took so long, or why it might have, like after the Emancipation Proclamation happened, there was some like weird little rule in there that said that it didn't take effect immediately in border states, and Texas being a border state, that would have problems there. And we already heard that Texas didn't give up right away. Also, so Texas held out really hardcore against the Civil War ending. And Lincoln said, I think we're going to free the slaves. I have problems with Lincoln. The more you learn about Lincoln as a person and less as this, like, heroic, perfect president that is, like, loves black people and did this specifically because of that love and wanting to help them, and really he just did it to be like, just like Biden signing Juneteenth and the holiday, he said, God, we gotta do something here. Let's free the slaves. Like, that seems like a thing we could do now.
Yeah.
It's a political move, first and foremost.
And even then, it wasn't his first option. We talked about this on a different episode, but, like, his first option was just to, like, round up all of the black people and put them on an island, and say, this is where you live now. I don't want you to live in the actual United States, so here's an island for you. It's best if black people just don't live here at all. It was Lincoln's initial plan.
Gross.
And it was so much the plan that he wanted that he, like, met with people about this, trying to, like, finance the plan. He, like, bought an island. He was, like, really going for this.
Wow. What the fuck?
Yeah, if I'm remembering correctly, the only reason he didn't actually go for it was because it was just really not feasible.
Yeah. I can't imagine that it would be.
So yeah, there was plenty of official reasons that, like, it didn't take effect immediately in Texas that we do know about. But, like, with a lot of history, that stuff gets left out. But also, there's a lot of real reasons why just hearing, well, the enslaved people just didn't know about it for 2 years. Like, they just hadn't heard about it. Which, so many articles that I read started out with the people of Texas, the enslaved population of Texas, just didn't hear about being free for 2 years. They just didn't hear about it. Like, they just literally didn't get the news. But there's a lot of nuance there, too. So I'm going to talk about that, because other than one or two sources, nobody talked about the fact that there's no way that they didn't hear about it.
Okay.
So, when General Granger sailed to Galveston in June of 1865, first off, he needed to sail there because Galveston is a port city, and because not everybody should be expected to know everything about geography. I'm just telling you that. It's right there on the coast, so he sailed there. And it was a huge city in June of 1865. He was accompanied by about 2,000 troops. And at the time, Galveston was the most populous city in Texas.
Oh. Wow.
So here's like the first problem that I have to bring up with the fact that people report this when they're teaching it as, yeah, the enslaved population of Texas just didn't hear about it. Because the man walked right into the biggest city in Texas.
Yes.
And also, it was an enormous port. It was a very populous port. It was very busy, and it was managed partly by black workers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it was a huge port, and it was managed partly, or maybe even in large part, by black workers. So the first issue is just that 2,000 Union troops just sort of sailed into Galveston, Texas, and a whole bunch of black people saw them do it.
Yeah. That's a key. That's a pretty,
Pretty obvious one.
Yeah. So that happened. And then Granger and his men took over a villa in town, and then they just sort of went about spreading the news all over Texas that now all the enslaved people needed to be free.
all right. Hey guys, guess what?
Go on.
Sorry, I was just...
That's as far as
I don't know
you got.
why I did that voice even. I'm just like...
You went German there for a second.
I don't know what happened. I can't explain it.
I was just fully ready
Please
for you
ignore
to just
me.
launch into it.
Please ignore me. I don't know what I'm saying.
I know you were just joking, but for real though, that's what he would have done. Like,
Oh, wait, really? Like, hey guys, guess what?
I mean, basically, the way that they would have disseminated this information would be to be loud about it, basically. So,
Just go into the town square?
I mean, yes, they would have very likely just taken over the town square so that he could first make a very loud announcement about it so that the most people possible could see it initially.
Hear ye, hear ye.
Hey, all you fuckers!
Mm-mm.
Guess what?
No slavery.
No more slavery as ruled by the president. Get
fucked.
Get fucked. Let these people go. They have better things to do.
Like, I don't know.
Get an education. Get paid to do the work. You know?
Pay?
Mm-hmm.
Bro, they don't even want to pay McDonald's workers.
They don't. Yeah. Alright. What happened next?
Well, so first they would have taken over a town square, probably. They would have gone to like a public area in Galveston and read the proclamation loudly so that as many people as possible could see it at once. So people in town would have heard this. They would have known about it. So at the very least, some people heard about it. Just like a month prior to this, Union soldiers had fought and won the last major action of the Civil War, which still happened a month after Lee surrendered. So, still. Black folks in Texas, even if they didn't hear about it in Galveston, had likely heard of the Emancipation Proclamation from travelers disembarking on the wharves, or just like around in the states in general. News of impending freedom had almost certainly reached other parts of Texas when enslaved African Americans from the rest of the South were transported there during the war, because Texas was considered like a haven state for slavers to take their quote-unquote property to. Because when the tide of the Civil War looked like it was not going to go the way that they wanted it to, people from all of the other southern states just sort of packed up and went to Texas. Because they were like, well, in Texas, that's where we can keep doing this. Because in Texas, we're going to get to just keep having our slaves and doing what we want, because they're not going to make us stop doing it in Texas. In Texas, we're just going to keep doing our thing. For some reason, they thought Texas was going to be the way to go. People had been traveling to Texas for a while. And yeah, that makes some sense. And I think some of it is how big it is. Some of it is just, maybe just how crazy Texas people are. So, in any case, Texas was like a safe haven for people to go to if they wanted to really keep their enslaved population to themselves. And even after the news was given, even after people knew, it's not like they cared that much. And even the people giving the proclamation didn't seem to care that much anyway, because that was the thing that when Karen said that maybe people took this as, like, with, like, some suspicion, because what if they don't actually let me leave? And I need to address that, because they didn't want them to leave anyway. Like, the people who told them that they were free told them not to leave. Because included in the proclamation that they were free was also the line, literally following up by saying, "Now you're free," was the line, "to stay quietly on the plantation and work for wages."
Balls to that.
And I'm not adding the word quietly in like myself. That was in there. Stay quietly on the plantation.
Damn.
That was part of the issued proclamation from Union soldiers when they gave these proclamations to groups of enslaved people on the plantations.
That's fucked up, bro.
And furthermore, black men and women were warned after they were freed not to flock to military posts. In 1863, when black men were allowed to enlist in the Union Army, its military posts had become like beacons of freedmen. The sight of blue uniforms, like liberating secessionists, often meant the promise of like food and clothing and stuff like that. And so Granger issued these warnings with the proclamation that black Texans, quote, "will not be supported in idleness," quote, on military posts or elsewhere, and suggested that they could not rely on federal troops, whether those Texans were seeking protection, searching for news about family and friends, looking for work, or in need of food. So the troops were there to make people liberate them, but would absolutely not help them.
Wow, what the fuck?
It's fucked up.
Yeah. And if we pop back over, it is. And if we pop back over to the Library of Congress's website, they had another article about this that said that it took a while for news to get all the way around Texas because, like, the newspapers just literally didn't print it.
They said, nope.
So you would think that something like "all of the slaves are freed now" would go up in the papers, and it just didn't go in the papers.
Nobody's allowed to know.
Yeah.
Big news? Nope. We control the news.
Oh, I hate that.
So there was a little small headline in some papers, but by and large, newspapers didn't say anything about it at all. And sometimes it would mention it, but it would give it like a one-sentence notice, like in the middle of a bunch of other things.
I know that trick.
And the only major dispatch from Galveston which talked about it at all was from a correspondent for the New York Daily Tribune who talked about the mood in the city. And that guy said, here's a quote from the Library of Congress, quote, "He seemed unaware the order had been issued the previous day." And so a quote from that correspondent's article, his name is Jatros.
Oh, what
one thing.
What a name.
Yeah. So that guy's article reads, "Galveston is a city of dogs and desolation." Which is just an opener. And he notes that, quote, "colored Union troops kept the peace, but still referred to the local black population as slaves," quote.
Yeesh.
Yuck.
That correspondent also noted that livestock roamed the streets at will, that the city's houses were painted yellow, that the stores were dingy and devoid of merchandise, that the people were, quote, "stunted and scraggy," quote, like the local trees. This is the kinds of stuff that he was writing about. Like, he just didn't really mention at all what was going on. The Library of Congress notes that this guy's reportage of the events is by far the most in-depth report from the place where Juneteenth originates, and it doesn't mention the slaves being freed at all.
Oh my god.
Great. Great.
So it took until July 1st until the Weekly Dallas Herald printed the actual orders that all of the enslaved people be freed, but they put it on page 2.
Yeah.
And they put it with the weather.
Wow.
Ugh. That is annoying.
Yeah. And then on July 8th, a different paper reported, quote, all slaves are free, and they printed it underneath the news roundup under the headline, Afternoon Telegraph from the Southwest.
Oh my god.
Afternoon Telegraph from the Southwest. That's all. It's just a telegraph.
Yeah. So, like, they literally just made it as, like, they made it seem like this news didn't matter at all.
Yeah, like it wasn't the biggest fucking deal in the history of the country or whatever. I don't know.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And then, the Library of Congress notes that the white people of Texas did not regard Granger's orders as good news, which we know, of course, and that they really didn't care. And that following the order that all of their enslaved people be set free, the mayor of Galveston called a meeting of the city council to address the, quote, altered condition of the colored population, which required new regulations for the protection of the citizens, meaning the protection of their white citizens. And General Granger, still being around, took some action. And so the next day, General Granger, who was still there, made a decree that, quote, no persons formerly slaves will be permitted to travel on the public thoroughfares without passes or permits from their employers, meaning their former masters, or to congregate in buildings or in camps at or adjacent to any military post or town, quote.
What the fuck?
So when you said, what if they won't let me leave? I mean, literally the next day they told him,
You can't leave.
You can't leave.
we're going to make it as hard as possible for you to leave.
Wow. That is some fucked up shit.
Yeah. So it took less than 10 days after obtaining, in Lincoln's words, quote, absolute equality for black Texans to be ordered by the federal government to get permission from their former owners to so much as walk down the street.
Jesus Christ.
Equality! This
Yeah.
is still what some people consider equality to be.
Mm-hmm. So, that was the immediate aftermath of what is Juneteenth. That was what the day and the week following it was like.
I hate that for them.
Yes, but Juneteenth isn't a holiday because of General Granger's or Abraham Lincoln's orders. That's not why Juneteenth is what it is. Juneteenth is the day that it happened, but Juneteenth isn't a holiday because of the white guys who said it is.
No. So who made Juneteenth?
Weren't you listening? She walked 2.5 miles a day.
Yeah, her name is Opal Lee.
Duh.
94.
Duh. I'm so sorry.
No, Juneteenth is a holiday, and it's a federal holiday now because black Texans and then all of the rest of the black population celebrated it for years and decades, more than a century, when they weren't allowed to, when they were lynched because of it, just against all of the violence that they faced, even for just celebrating their own freedom, because they just kept doing it in the unyielding belief that the United States might someday become a land of the free for real. So, I mean, that's it. It's not because Biden made it a holiday, or because Lincoln said that they could be free. Because right after, during the Reconstruction period, I mean, literally, people still continued to treat the black population the same. There was tons of backlash. There was a lot of violence. People wanted them to not be free. The limitations against black citizens was baked right into the proclamation itself, and they were told to be quiet, and they were told that they needed permission to exist in any capacity. And then in like the years following, they were, if they celebrated publicly or too loudly, then they were punished violently for doing so. And so those limitations were baked into the initial proclamation, and the same discrimination and limitations has sort of become embedded in public policies, not just in Texas, but like literally in the whole country, even in the parts of the country that likes to think they're the most liberal. So now, I mean, we're left with unequal housing and employment opportunities and wealth gaps and educational and residential segregation, police brutality, and political disenfranchisement. You know, my kids go to a school that's a majority black population because we just happen to live in the part of the city that's sort of been redlined into it being that way.
Mm-hmm.
And that's that way because if you go back all the way to this that we've just been talking about, all of that just really gross discrimination and limitation is just baked right into, you can be free now, but here's your conditions for doing that.
Yeah.
And it's just been building on since then. But only a few years after this happened, I think it was 1972, enough people had pooled their resources together that they bought a park, Emancipation Park, so that they could legally have a place to celebrate in public.
Oh, hell yeah.
Which is like the driving spirit of the holiday, really, is that. Perseverance.
Got it. Yeah. I think just the thing that sticks with me the most is that they were just told to, yeah, you're free. And that's like something that you would normally like jump and cheer about, I feel like. And then you're just told to be quiet. And I feel like that is just, you know, that's just the common narrative for, if you're black in America. Yeah. And yeah. And not just, I mean, yeah, it's just for anyone who's oppressed. Like, it's always been this way. And, like, we gave you the moon. Like, the idea of letting slaves free, they were like, it's so monumental, when really it's just, this was just an acknowledgement that they are human beings, and we are not better than them. And it's not like we did anything great. We just set things back to, it was supposed to be kind of an equalizing, but it just didn't even end up being that. It was just, how are we going to find other ways to enslave these people if we can't have them as property? How are we going to keep them where they are and keep them from coming up to the level that we're at? And that, like, so yeah, it's just like exactly what you said, Remy. Sorry if I'm repeating it, but it's exactly. Like, how can you tell someone that they can't even celebrate even this victory that like isn't even a full-on victory? Like, how are you going to tell someone, no, you can't be happy right now? Be happy, but be happy in the way that we want you to be happy.
Be happy. Oh, not like that.
Not like that. Like, fuck off. Leave them alone. Mind your business. It just makes me mad. So infuriated. And just perseverance. Just the idea that they have to. Sometimes I worry that it's like they have to persevere through a conversation with white people, and I'm like, yeah, I get it. It's like, just, oof. Because I feel that way talking to old people. I'm like, oof, this is, like, imagine living your whole life like that, though. Like, ugh. I can't imagine how tired you would be. Sorry. I went off there.
It's okay. Don't apologize. And also, again, that's how slavery ended. But also, it didn't end because for slavery to actually end, people needed to accept the 13th Amendment. And then, what was it? What were the states? Like, Delaware was a surprising one that held out for a surprisingly long time before they decided to ratify the 13th Amendment.
Right. Like, 1999, wasn't it?
Something like that, but play a fun game that's not really fun because it'll make you angry. What state held out the longest?
DC. It's not a state, sorry. That held out the longest. And it's going to make me angry?
Not the state, probably, but just the information.
Just how long it took?
Yeah.
And it's not Delaware.
It's not Delaware.
I think you've told us.
Was it one of the Carolinas?
Yeah.
No, it's not one of the Carolinas. Karen, what's your guess?
I thought it was going to be one of the Carolinas. I was like, oh, yeah, yeah. Shit. Georgia?
No, it was Mississippi.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense. I'm sorry. I feel like you've told us this before.
How long did it take them?
Gosh.
Late 1800s.
2016.
Oh, so close, Karen. Mississippi did not ratify the 13th Amendment until 2013.
Oh my god.
That is the dumbest thing I've ever heard. That's fucked up. It's real fucked up.
Yep. And you had said about celebration, how did it go from not being allowed to be celebrated at all to being what it is now? So, like, initially, it wasn't so much a celebration anyway. So, like, before there was Juneteenth in 1863, January 1st, New Year's Eve initially was watch night. Those were watch night services. So, enslaved and free African Americans would gather together in churches and in private homes and stay up and wait for the news that the Emancipation Proclamation had taken effect.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is why still in black communities, New Year's Eve, in some of them, still include a lot of, like, church stuff or religious stuff in there, staying up till midnight.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, my staying up till midnight on New Year's Eve is, like, I'm gonna sit in my house and watch a movie.
Yeah.
A whole lot of people go and drink or whatever. A bunch of the black people that I am, like, in my circles who are not, like, children, like, who are not younger than I am, ones who are, like, in their 30s and older, go to church on New Year's Eve.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you go backwards in the history, that started January 1st, 1863 with Watch Night, which was to stay up and make sure that slavery was going to be ended.
Mm-hmm.
And so when that happened and everybody was declared to be legally free, that was sort of like the pre-Juneteenth.
Okay.
And so when that happened, Union soldiers, and there were plenty of them who were black, marched onto plantations and across the city in the South, and they were, like, reading their little copies of the Emancipation Proclamation, spreading the news. So that was sort of like the celebration that happened before Juneteenth was its thing, was, like, people running around being like, I'm going to read this official document saying that I'm free now.
Yeah.
But after all of that, and after, like, everything slowed down a little bit and people could do anything that was even a little bit like a celebration, it turned into this period that's called the scatter, which is where people sort of, like, went to the surrounding states after they decided that they could just leave. Mm-hmm. And even though there were some proclamations in place that made it hard to travel, they were actually legally free and that they could just go. So they went to live in the surrounding states around Texas. And so then the first things that were sort of like a celebration was just people coming back to Texas.
Oh.
You know, kind of like how people do a pilgrimage.
Yeah.
So people would, like, come back to meet up with family that was, like, still here in Texas. Here, like I am in Texas. Like, they were still in Texas. So they would meet up with those people, and they would, like, have a get-together, and they would pray and eat and dance, and they would listen to each other's stories. Because oral storytelling is a big part of this community in general, but also just part of Juneteenth and everything to do with it. Storytelling and oral, and that is necessary and important because the histories don't get passed down otherwise, as we've seen. But this wasn't seen as, like, a celebration so much as, like, an act of resistance, because they could get in trouble, and not officially because it was not illegal, but they could just get in trouble with the white communities.
Mm-hmm.
And from there, it turned into religious services, speeches, like that guest speakers coming and, like, giving inspirational speeches and doing, like, stories from formerly enslaved people. That became, like, a big thing. Games and contests. Rodeos became a big deal.
Rodeos?
Texas.
Yeah, because it's Texas.
Yeah, okay.
So Texas was the first state to make Juneteenth an official holiday. But, like, because it's Texas, rodeos and, like, horse riding and stuff like that has been part of the Juneteenth celebration, because it was in Texas where it was, like, actually a celebration for the longest amount of time before it sort of spread elsewhere as being an actual celebration, and not just, like, a get-together where you shared stories and had, like, prayer and food and stuff. So the place where it was a party and a celebration the longest was in Texas, and you had rodeos.
That's so funny. Interesting.
Interesting, yeah. And baseball and singing and like lots of food. Music has always been really important. Music was a big part of the, like, culture of the enslaved population in general anyway. So it's just sort of, like, moved through. Afro jazz, blues, and worship were the types of music that I found were the most important. And then they would, from what I have found, it says the Emancipation Proclamation was commonly read to kick off Juneteenth celebrations. And clothes were finally also the last, like, really huge part. And are still also a crucial part from what I'm gathering from my reading, because formerly enslaved people didn't get clothes so much. Like, Frederick Douglass's memoir, I think, said that he got his one pair of clothes for the whole year, and then he got another one the next year. So, making a distinction between lives in captivity and the life afterward was essential, and so one way to do this was to, like, dress up for the occasion. So you're wearing, like, bright and lively clothing, something you're not able to do in general other times. One thing that I read, one of the articles said that sometimes it was, like, wearing the clothing that they stole from the plantation that they came from.
Nice.
Yes. And then, of course, like, the colors would be, like, honoring the places that you came from, where your ancestors came from. So, like, African colors, wherever it is that you came from in Africa, and stuff like that. So that's sort of where we're at. And Juneteenth celebrations nowadays are really not that different from that. Rodeos are still a big deal, apparently, in Texas, but, like, barbecues and singing and dancing and storytelling and speeches, those things are all still important. And red is the color of the food and the drink that you're going to get if you go to a Juneteenth celebration, because
Why red?
it pays an homage to African narratives and West African tradition. The color is said to represent strength and spirituality and carries, like, a lot of weight to many aspects of West African culture. So there's that. There's my telling of all of my research into Juneteenth and the, like, journey to get from there to here. And then that little bit of how, even as, like, non-black folks, you can connect to it somehow, in some way.
Even just learning about it.
If you are not marginalized in some way, then the least you can do is just be quiet and learn about it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, sit down, be quiet, and stay in your seat.
And clap when it's over.
Yeah. And say thank you for teaching me.
Yes. Just don't be a dick. That's the basics. Thank you all so much for listening. We hope you enjoyed this episode. If you would like more of this content, feel free to like us in whatever your favorite podcast platform is. You can follow us, subscribe. I don't know what you're listening on. Today was more of a subject, but we do answer a lot of questions. We love really weird questions. So if you have a question that you've been dying to ask and you need an answer, we're going to take you seriously and we're going to look into it. Or at least Remy is, because he's a research expert. So you can email us at whywouldyouskthatpod@gmail.com, or you can visit our website at whywouldyouskthat.com. And we have a little contact form. You can fill that out, put in a funny name. We love those. And feel free to ask your question. We'll get to it as soon as we can. We're getting more and more, so we're really excited. And yeah, stay tuned. See you next time.
Bye.